Yeah, welcome. So the topic we'll be discussing in this lecture is multi-core computers. So we'll be moving to the next topic. So with what we have discussed last class, with that we'll put a full stop to parallel computing. And now we'll be moving to multi-core computing, multi-core computers. Okay, before starting, let me give a brief introduction to multi-core computers. What is multi-core computer? Multi-core computer actually in the last chapter, if you recall, we have learned something called as chip multiprocessor. So, so if you recall what is a chip multiprocessor in the sense, if you have more than one multiprocessor in a single chip, say this is one chip, okay, one chip, right? That is an electronic chip. So in a single chip, if you have more than one processor, say this is processor 1 and this is processor 2, then that is called as a multi-core processor or a multi-core computer. Okay, if a computer contains a chip with more than one processor, then this type of processor is called as a multi-core processor, and the computer that holds that is called as a multi-core computer, right? So this is the this is what a multi-core computer is. I think it's clear. So with this basic knowledge, let us try to understand what we are going to discuss. So here the learning objective of this chapter is, first we'll be understanding the motivation behind multi-core computers. What is the need for multi-core computers? Normally we are using computers where in a single chip there will be only one processor, right? A chip contains only one processor. This is the trend. This is the trend for several decades since computers were invented in 1940s. So till 2010 or somewhere between 2005 to 10, there is nothing like multi-core computers. Every computer used to have only one processor. After that, only the concept of multi-core emerged, where in a single chip we are now having more than one processor. Okay, so it can be two processor or three processor. So if you have two processor, then we call it as duo cores. Okay, if you have more than two processor, then three core, four core, six cores. Okay, there are processor with six cores also, right? Okay, even there are processor with more than 100 cores, 120 cores, 130 cores. Such processor are also available. Intel is producing such processor, which are normally used for machine learning or deep learning applications. Okay, so first we'll be trying to understand the motivation behind multi-core computers. What is the need for multi-core computers? Okay, so basically the need for multi-core computer is, there are some hardware performance issues with respect to normal microprocessor. Okay, here microprocessor in the sense, we are talking about a processor, one processor in a chip with one processor. So that we are calling it as a normal multiprocessor. Okay, so there is only one processor here. So in this type of processors there are some performance issues which over a period of time we are facing. Okay, so to mitigate that issue we are going for multi-core computers. So what are those issues, and why we are mm, interested in multi-core computers, or why there is a shift towards multi-core computers? That is what we are going to discuss in this lecture. Okay, so this lecture is primarily dedicated towards the motivation for multi-core computers. If we are not using multi-core computers, what are the hardware performance issues that we will face without using a multi-core computers? That's what we are going to discuss. Okay, so because of these performance issues, so there are some performance issues which will be facing when we use a when we use a processor, when you use only one processor in a chip. Okay, to overcome those issues we are going for multi-core computers. That's what we are going to discuss in this lecture. But later in the further lectures we will be also discussing the software performance issues that will be faced with multi-thread multi-core computers. Okay, see, these two are entirely different, you should understand. Here we are discussing the hardware performance issues that were happening in a normal single processor. not multi-core, single core processor. And because of these performance issues, we are going for multi-core computers. Okay. The second topic is, when you are using multi-core computers, okay, then there will be some software performance issues. Why? Because generally all softwares are designed for single core computers, right? If you take operating systems like Windows, any operating system, Linux or Unix, they are existing, oh, since long time, but basically they are designed for single core processor. They are not designed for multi core processors. So when so like that, any software you take, typically the softwares were designed for single core computers. They are not designed for multi core computers. So when the softwares were used in a multi core computers, there will be some performance issues. So what are those performance issues? That's what we'll be discussing in the next topic. Okay. So it's not only operating system, it may be programming languages also, like Java, or database management systems. So all these softwares are typically designed for single core computers. So when you use that in a multi-core computers, there will be some performance issues, and they should be tuned according to that. That's what we are going to discuss in the next topic. The third topic is multi-core organization. So how this multi-core will be organized in a chip or in a computer? That's what we'll be discussing as a third topic, right? So these are the learning objectives of this chapter. So in this lecture, we'll be discussing the motivation for multi-core computers, uh, and the performance issues that were faced with a normal single-core computers, which push us towards the usage of multi-core computers. Right? Okay. So now let us continue. Right. So, so over a period of time, if you see, the performance of the microprocessors is incrementing in an exponential way. Right. The microprocessor's performance is increasing in an exponential way. Okay. So probably you might be uh, hearing about Moore's law, right? You might be knowing about Moore's law. So what Moore's law states? Moore's law states that the number of transistors that were placed in a processor will double every 1 year. Okay, this is what Moore's law states approximately, right? The number of transistors that were kept inside the processor will double every 1 year. Okay, which means that inside a processor, I'll write it fully, will double. Okay, so Moore's law states that the number of transistors inside a processor will double approximately every 1 year, or 1.5 years. Okay, or 1.5 years. Okay, this is what the Moore's law states, which means what? The processor size is not going to change. The processor size will be same, but the number of transistors that will be packed inside, that will double, which means that technology will grow at that rate. Okay, so Moore's law actually talking about the technology growth. How, at what rate the technology is going to grow, especially the electronics or computer industry. At what rate it is going to grow? It is going to grow. That means it is going to double every year. That's the meaning, right? So this statement says that only microprocessor means it's a processor. It's a normal processor, right? The processor performance is getting improved exponentially. Okay. So improving processor performance means what? It has improved organization. This is what improved organization. Improved organization means, say this year we are able to keep 1 million transistors inside this processor, means in next year we'll be able to keep 2 million transistors inside the processor. That's what Moore's law states, right? So that is what improved organization. So it means that last year within the same space I can keep only 1 million processors, but this year within the same space I can keep 2 million processors. So it means that our organizing skills has improved, right? So basically that is what this says. Okay. So improving performance means improving organization and increasing the clock frequency. Okay, but this is little skeptical, because you know that just increasing the clock frequency will not improve the performance. When you increase the clock frequency, then the number of instructions executed with a higher frequency should also be same. When the number of I mean the number of instruction executed with a lower frequency should be same as the number of instruction executed with the improved frequency. Okay, so at top level we can say that improving performance means improving organization and increasing the clock frequency. Okay, so, not only these two, not only these are the, so apart from these two ways of improving performance, there are other ways of improving performance also. Like, we can increase the degree of parallelism. We are talking about only a computer with single processor. We are not discussing anything about multiprocessor or multi-core computers. Okay, we are trying to understand the performance issues in a normal uniprocessor environment. That's what we are going to understand. Okay, so because of these performance issues, we are going to go for what? Multi-core computers. Okay, so all these things, whatever we are discussing, it is with respect to a unicore processor or a uniprocessor. There is only single processor, but the performance of these processors are increasing exponentially with respect to, so increasing exponentially means they are improving the organization by keeping more transistors inside the chip and by increasing the clock frequency. Apart from that, there is also increased parallelism. What is increased parallelism? So again we are talking about uniprocessor system. So there are three ways of improving parallelism in a uniprocessor system: either by using pipelining, or by using superscalar environment, or by using simultaneous multi-threading. Okay, all these are we have already learned, but I will give a brief. Pipelining means, so there will be multiple stages. There may be instruction fetch stage. Okay, there may be instruction decode stage, there may be execute stage, and there may be write stage. Okay, so now what happens if one instruction is in write stage, then another instruction can be in execute stage. Okay, and another instruction can in decode stage, and another instruction can be in uh, this is fetch. Okay, another instruction can be in fetch stage. Okay, so which means what? Which means that in one clock cycle we can execute more than one instruction. In one clock cycle we can execute more than one instruction, which we have already learned several examples, right? Okay, so if you are not using pipelining, then if you are not using pipelining, then for every instruction it will take 4 clock cycles. If you consider each stage as one clock cycle. Okay, but when you use pipelining, the uh, the rate at which the instruction executed will decrease. Okay, that is, more instructions will be executed with less number of clock cycle. So that is about pipelining. And next is superscalar. What is meant by superscalar? Superscalar means, now also we are talking about uniprocessor. We are not at all going anything like, we are not discussing anything about multiprocessor. So superscalar means some functional units, we may have more than one copies of a particular functional unit. For example, in the previous topic we have discussed that there are 3 ALUs. So if you have 3 ALUs, then that is an example of superscalar, because now you can perform 3 arithmetic operation parallelly, 1 2 3. Okay, and these 3 ALUs can be further, it can be pipelined. These 3 ALUs can be further pipelined. Okay, for example, if these 3 ALUs, there are, if you perform an what do you call, if you perform a subtraction, if you perform floating point subtraction, that may take 4 stages. Okay, like compare, shift the exponent. Okay, and adjust the significant, add the significant. Okay, like that, shift the exponent. Okay, add the exponent and normalize. These are the 4 stages, right? Compare, shift, add, and normalize. So these are the 4 stages. So now we have 3 ALUs and each ALU has 4 stages. So totally it means as if you are having 12 independent units, which means that your degree of parallelism is 12. Your degree of parallelism is 12. It means that 12 instructions can be executed simultaneously. Each, of course, each will be in one stage of the pipeline. Are you getting? So you have three compare unit. So three instructions can be can perform compare at the same time. Another three instruction can perform shift at the same time. Another three instruction can perform add at the same time. Another three instruction can perform uh, mm, this normalize at the same time. Okay, so that is what is called a superscalar. And next is simultaneous multithreading. Simultaneous multithreading is also one form of superscalar. See, in a normal superscalar, only the functional units will be, you will have multiple copies. ALU you have multiple copies, or some other functional units you have multiple copies. Whereas in a simultaneous multithreading, apart from functional units, the what you call the registers also will be multiple units. Normally general purpose registers will have only one unit, right? So there are A1, A2 up to A16 means there will be one unit. But now you may have multiple units. As you have three ALUs, say let us have multiple sets of general purpose registers. Set, this is set 1, this is set 2, this is set 3. Okay. With this, what will happen in the sense, in a single clock cycle, you can execute multiple threads parallelly. Okay, you can execute multiple thread parallelly. If you recall the topic multiprocessor and chip multiprocessing, there only in SMT we have discussed something like this, where sorry, only in SMT we have discussed something like this, where in a single, like say for example, if you have multiple functional units in a single clock cycle, SMP can issue instructions from more than one threads. Okay, say there are thread A, thread B, thread C, and thread D. So it may give two slots for thread A, and it may give two slots for thread B, and it may give one slot for thread C. This is possible only with simultaneous multithreading. In no other multithreading it is possible. In other multithreading it is not possible. Okay, we have discussed different types of multithreading, right? Like scalar, interleaving, blocked, all those things. In interleaving, if you see, there also you may have superscalar units. There also you may have superscalar units, and in one clock cycle, multiple threads can be executed. But all these instructions should be from the same thread. For example, in clock cycle 1, if it is A, everything should be A only. Maybe some blank will be there. In the second, if it is B, everything should be B only. Parallelly, it cannot include instructions from different threads. But only this SMT can support instructions from different threads. How it is supporting? Because it is not only using superscalar, that is, it uses multiple functional units. Apart from that, the registers also, it has multiple copies. The set of registers, the general purpose registers, will be multiple copies. So if A register is using this register set, if thread A is using these registers, thread B will be using some other registers, and thread C will be using some other registers. Okay, that is how it works. But in other cases, no, everybody is sharing the same set of registers. So when A is using, A is using that register. When context switch happens, A will store all these registers into the stack. Okay, and again B will use the register. Are you getting? So that is the reason, right? So performance increase. So the point is, performance improvement happens through these things also, through pipelining, superscalar, and also through simultaneous multithreading. Okay, right. So all these we are discussing with respect to uniprocessing system. Okay, but still, even though performance increases, everything is fine. But still there is a limit. You cannot keep on improving the performance. There is a upper bound. For example, if you see pipelining, what is pipelining? Pipelining means you provide more functional units. That is the extent to which you provide more functional unit, to that extent the degree of parallelism will increase. If your pipeline is 2, if your pipeline contains 2 stages, then maximum the degree of parallelism can be 2. If the pipeline contains 4 stages, then the degree of parallelism will be 4. If the pipeline contains 6 stages, then the degree of parallelism will be 6. If the pipeline contains n stages, then the degree of parallelism will be n. But can we keep on increase, or is there any upper bound? So the scientists has checked on that. They are keep on improving the complexity. They are keep on improving the complexity. They are increasing the degree of parallelism, or the pipeline stages keep on increasing. But there is upper bound. But practically it was observed that theoretically there is no upper bound. Okay. Theoretically, if you increase, it should improve. If you work out with pen and paper, if you increase the number of stages, it should improve. Okay. But practically it is observed that after a certain point of time, right? So if you see x-axis as the number of stages in the pipeline and y-axis as the performance, okay, then so this is number of stages. Okay, this is number of stages in the pipeline. This is performance. Y-axis is performance. If you see, then if you keep increasing the number of stages, of course the performance will increase. Increase, but after a certain point of time it becomes flat. There is no improvement. So you getting, there is upper bound. There is upper bound. After that it won't improve. So that is applicable for everything. That is applicable for pipelining. That is applicable for superscalar. That is applicable for simultaneous multithreading. Okay. So in pipelining, if you keep on increase the stages, after a certain limit, it won't improve in performance. Similarly, in superscalar also, if you superscalar means what? Providing more functional units. Say I have 3 ALUs and each ALU contains 3-stage pipeline, then I can execute 9 instructions parallelly. Okay. So if I have 10 ALUs or 20 ALUs or 100 ALUs, but if you keep on increase like that, after a certain period of time, the performance will not increase. That is applicable for SMT also. So SMT is also superscalar with multiple copies of the registers. So registers, if I keep on increase the number of register copies, then again there is a limit on that, right? Okay. So you may ask why the limit? The limit is because the complexity of the circuit. See, if you keep on increase these stages, the complexity of the electronic circuit will increase, right? So that is what this point says, diminishing returns. So that doesn't mean that if you keep increasing the pipelining or superscalar or SMT, the performance will keep on increase. No, after a certain point of time, the performance will diminish, diminishing returns. The performance will not increase even if you increase the pipelining, or even if you increase the number of stages in the pipelining or number of functional units or the registers, right? Because what happens in the sense, if you keep on increase, the complexity of the logic also will increase, the hardware complexity also will increase, right? And you cannot pack everything in the same chip, right? So when you want more features, then the chip area also will become big. Okay, if you want to keep more pipeline stages, if you want to have more functional units, then the chip size also will become big, and designing and debugging, all these things will become highly complex. Okay, so these are the issues with what? With the normal multiprocessors with respect to hardware performance, right? Okay. So this diagram just explains the superscalar thing. So this is superscalar. Superscalar means what? You have multiple functional units. You may have multiple program counter, multiple fetch unit, all these things, right? This program counter, all these things will have multiple copies. But registers will be only single copy, single thread register file. Okay. Whereas in simultaneous multi-threading, here you have multiple you have multiple program counters, PC1 to PCN, right? Similarly, you may have other functional units also, multiple functional units. But registers also you have multiple. See, register 1, there are different sets of register, register 2, register 3 up to register n. Okay, so this is the difference between SMT and superscalar. So this is also superscalar but with SMT, but with multiple registers. So because of that, it can execute instructions from multiple thread in the same clock cycle. And this is the architecture of multi-core. Okay, so in multi-core, you see, this is one chip. This outer box is one chip. In one chip, we have many CPUs. CPU 1, CPU 2, CPU 3 up to CPU n. Okay, each CPU has its own L1 cache. Each CPU will have its own L1 cache. CPU 1 will have its own L1 cache, CPU 2 will have its own L1 cache, CPU 3 will have its own L1 cache, up to CPU 1 will have its own L1 cache. The L1 cache is divided into two types. One is called as L1 instruction cache and the other one is L1 data cache. The instruction cache will contain only the instruction. The data cache will contain only the data. Okay. L2 cache is common. You can see here there are n CPUs. If there are 100 CPUs, the L2 cache will be common, but L1 cache will be there will be a different L1 cache for each of the CPU, but there is a common L2 cache. Okay, so this is the architecture of multi-core computers, right? So this is whatever we have discussed previously. That is, as the performance, as you increase the pipelining or superscalar or or SMT, simultaneous multi-threading, the performance will increase to a certain extent, but after that it won't increase. It will become flat. Okay, to take this particular graph here in 1985 to 1990, around 1990, you see the graph is almost flat. The graph is almost flat because during this period, this pipelining, all these concepts were not. It's not there, or it's not very much implemented. Okay, but later after 1990s, okay, after 1989 or 90, the pipelining, superscalar, all these features, they were started incorporating into the microprocessor. So we are talking about single processor, uniprocessor. Okay, so after 1990, in the processor, the scientists and engineers were started to incorporate these features: pipelining, superscalar, and SMT. So as you incorporate these features, the performance is keep on increasing. It is increasing at exponential rate, but that increment again it becomes flat around 2000. After 2000, you see it is almost flat. Okay, because why? Because there is a limit. You cannot improve more than beyond a point. This limit is not theoretical; it is a practical limit. Okay, because when you keep on increase, the complexity of the hardware getting increased, right? So there are several other issues getting created. Because of that, the performance is not improving, right? So that is what this two graph says. Okay, this two graph is talking about that only. Okay, so these are the graphs which are taken from Intel. Okay, these graphs are not any ordinary people graph. Actually, Intel gave this graph. Okay, so with they checked with their own processors, right? Okay. So not only that, the power consumption also. As you try to increase the performance of the processor, the power consumption also will increase drastically. So this graph compares the power that is consumed by a typical uniprocessor computer. This graph is talking about the power that will be consumed by a typical uniprocessor computer starting from 1985 to 2003. You can see here in 1985 a typical computer, it is consuming hardly uh, 1 watt or 2 watts of power. Okay, because its performance will be that level. Okay, but slowly when the performance of the computer of the processor is getting improved because of pipelining, superscalar, and all other features, what happens? The power consumption is gradually increasing. In 2003, if you see a typical processor is consuming around 100 watts of power, around 100 watts of power. Right? So power consumption is also one of the major issues with respect to hardware performance in a uniprocessor system. Okay, so all these things we are discussing. What we are discussing, the drawbacks or the performance issues that are connected with uniprocessor system. Okay, the performance issues that are connected with uniprocessor system. Okay, so we are trying to understand the reason behind learning something called or developing something called multi-core computers, right? Because so the point, this graph what it says in the sense, ultimately it says that a uniprocessor computer performance cannot be improved beyond a point. That is what it says. A uniprocessor's performance cannot be improved beyond a point. So it means you cannot improve its performance after this. whatever you add, whatever the amount of pipelining you add, whatever the amount of superscaling you do, whatever the amount of what you call SMT, symmetric multiprocessing you do, symmetric multi-threading you do, its performance is not going to increase, or the increment will be very, very minute. Okay. So this graph basically says that the uniprocessor performance cannot be improved further. Cannot be improved further. Okay. And again, this graph says that if you keep on increasing the performance, the power consumption will increase drastically. Power consumption will increase drastically. So that is also not an happy thing to know, right? Okay. So these are the motivation. These are the reason behind why we are going to go for something called as multi-core. Okay. So multi-core has a potential for non-linear improvement. Okay. So right. So so the power requirements also grow exponentially with chip density. Okay. So one of the so in this graph, what we have discussed in the sense with uniprocessor system, the power requirement is increasing. So the question is there any way to reduce the power requirement? Is there any way to reduce the power requirement? Can we reduce the power requirement further? Can we reduce the power requirement further? So that is the question. So the answer is yes, there is a way to reduce the power requirement. That is, so yes, if you take a typical processor, we are still talking about uniprocessor system. So it contains what in a chip? It contains processor. But apart from processor, does it have anything? Yes, it has something called as L1 cache. There is L1 cache also in the processor. Okay. So is there any way to reduce the power requirement in the sense? There is one way. That way is give more space for cache. Give more space for cache and less space for the processor requirement. Okay. So actually in the chip there is a processor, but L1 cache is a part of the processor. So this technique, what it says in the sense, give most of the area for cache. Give 50 percentage or more than 50 percentage of space for cache and give the remaining space for actual processor circuit. So the CPU contains two things. It contains cache and its own circuit. So the one way to reduce the power requirement is most of the CPU space should be given for cache. Okay. So the reason is the transistors that were used in cache memory, the transistors cache memory is used everywhere. Okay, the type of transistor that were used in cache memory will consume less power when compared with the type of the transistors that were used in the processor for performing computation operation. Okay, so this is one of the technique suggested to reduce the power consumption. Okay. So to reduce the power requirement, what you can do is can use more chip area for cache. That is, most of the chip area for the processor should be used for cache purpose. Okay, right. So that is what's shown in this diagram. Mm, here we have discussed this. We'll come back to this. So this diagram, you see what it says in the sense, this is the power density, the power requirement. Okay, and this is the size of the what do you call how much size the cache occupies and how much size the other logic circuitry of the processor occupies. So processor contains cache and also logic circuitry. Okay, this is processor. Let us assume processor contains two things. It contains logic circuitry and cache, but the power requirement of cache is less than the power requirement of logic. So one of the way to reduce the power requirement is use more area for cache and less area for logic circuitry. So this graph, what it says in the sense, the memory memory in the sense here we are talking about cache memory. The cache memory, its power consumption is somewhere between 1 watts to 12 watts. Okay, this is minimum and this is the maximum, right? With respect to size, if it occupies 0.25 what do you call if it with respect to size in terms of micrometer, okay, if it occupies this is some very less size, if it occupies, then it needs it consumes hardly uh, maybe this is what 5 5 watts. Okay. If it occupies maximum space, probably it will occupy some 11 watts or 12 watts. But if you see the logic circuitry, even if it occupies less space, it is going to consume around 30 watts, right? If it occupies more space, then it is going to consume up to 100 watts. Okay, so that is how this proposal came. It suggests to go for uh, what do you call? It suggests to go use more chip area for catch. Right? So this is the older data. It says that by 2015 there will be 100 billion transistors on a die. Die means a chip. Chip. Okay, a chip of this size, 30 millimeter square. In that chip there will be 100 million transistors, and there will be a catch of 100 MB. Okay, if you use a catch of 100 MB, then 1 billion transistors for logic. Okay, so the remaining transistors will be used in catch. So by keeping the size of the catch more, the power requirement can be reduced. Okay, so there is a rule called Pollock's rule, which states that performance is roughly proportional to the square root of increase in complexity. Okay, so as you increase the complexity of the circuit, what happens? The performance will improve. How much it will improve? It is roughly proportional to the square root of the increase in complexity. Okay. So why are we increasing the complexity? Because we want to increase the performance, right? As we already discussed, say today if I can keep 100 million transistors inside the chip, then in the next year the industry want to keep 200 million transistors within the same chip, within the same size. So obviously the organization will become complex, right? Okay. So that's what this rule says. Performance is roughly proportional to the square root of increase in complexity. Okay. Right? So because of these issues, we are going for multi-core computers. Okay. So mainly what is used? The performance cannot be improved beyond a certain limit in a uniprocessor system, and also if you keep on improving the performance, then the power consumption also will increase. Even though there is a way to reduce the power consumption by by providing more space for catch, but still power consumption is an issue. These diagrams we have discussed already. These also we have discussed. This is another diagram which shows especially about the when you increase the number of cores. Now we are talking about multi-core. When you increase when you increase the number of cores also, what will happen? The power will increase, power consumption will increase, frequency will increase, transistors also will increase, number of required transistors. I mean, not in, I mean, in a chip, we are going to have two cores. Okay, so the number of transistors will also increase. So, but still, when compared with a uniprocessor system, its performance will be an improvement. So this graph it shows that. So this represents the number of cores. So you can see in previously we don't have any multi-core computers. You can see this graph starting from 1982 around 2004-5 there is no multi-core computers. After 2005 slowly the multi-core computers are gradually increasing. Right? So okay. So you can see the power consumption also is increasing. So up to this point there is no multi-core computer. There is only unicore. But still this represents power consumption. Okay. Still the power consumption is increasing because of pipeline, superscalar, all these things the power consumption is increasing. Okay. But here is after the multi-core computers, you cannot say that power consumption is increasing much. It is becoming flat. Okay. So the point is multi-core computer with multi-core computers, we are going to improve the performance, but it is not going to improve the power consumption uh, or or other things much. Okay, but performance will improve. Right. You can see the frequency also. Frequency is improving gradually. After multi-core environment, frequency is also becoming not that much. It's flat. Okay. Number of transistors is keep on increasing. There is no change in that flow. It is exponential. It is as per Moore's law. Okay. So there is no it is not dependent on this. Right. So that's what this graph is talking about. Okay. And So that's it. So that's it about this topic. So here basically we are discussing the need or why we are going for multi-core computers. So the reason behind multi-core computer is because a single core computer performance will become flat after a certain point of time, and also its power consumption will increase gradually. So to avoid that problem, we want to keep on the performance getting improved. So then what is the option? Now there is no other option. You have to go only for multi-core processor. You add the number of processors. So in a single chip, where each processor is called as a core. So that is the way to improve the performance. That is the need for, or that is the motivation behind multi-core computers. Okay, let's stop here. Thank you.